Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for March 29th, 2024. I'm going to be looking today at events of the last few days which have exposed the fraud of the repeated statements of Western officials that they are acting to defend a rules-based order and that they are acting in defense of democracy. We hear this often from people such as Blinken, Macron, Sunak, Annalena Baerbock, Biden, and others, to justify the massive expenditures on weapons and the continuation of assaults against the people of Ukraine. And when I say that, I'm saying that the NATO decision to continue to fund the war against Russia in Ukraine is killing off the Ukrainian population and has nothing to do with democracy or rules-based order. But also, we see the smokescreen that's been put up to defend the ethnic cleansing in Gaza of the Israel Defense Forces that are being deployed by the maniac Benjamin Netanyahu to ethnically cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. And these are merely slogans, defense of democracy and rules-based order slogans that are designed to justify the overthrow of governments which refuse to accept the dictates of the military-industrial financial complex of corporate cartels which are running the governments of the West. Let's start with what happened with the UN Security Council resolution at the beginning of the week, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza to allow emergency supplies to reach the starving and suffering Palestinians. Well, we're still seeing the prevention of supplies from being delivered. 7,000 aid trucks have been stalled at the Rafah border. 2% or so of these trucks get through every day as lengthy inspections take place and the food is not getting to the people who are starving. And UN officials, non-governmental organization officials, Doctors Without Frontiers, and others are testifying to the fact that there is starvation among a large number of the people in Gaza who have no access to food, no access to clean water, medical attention, fuel, and so on. Now, Israel, meanwhile, is lying that it's allowing the aid trucks to pass through, but observers are pointing out that it's absolutely not happening. Now, in response to the UN Security Council resolution, there's been pressure put on administration spokesmen, including John Kirby and Matthew Miller, the spokesman for the State Department. But Miller repeated yesterday what Kirby said the day before, that the resolution of the UN Security Council, in the opinion of the US, is non-binding, that it doesn't impose any new legal obligations on any of the parties. Now, that led to a grilling of Miller from reporters who asked him, well, does this mean that the resolutions against other countries that the US would support are not binding? And Miller said, well, we believe it should be implemented. But then he weaseled around, presenting a word salad, making him look like a cornered rat, insisting that it is not a binding resolution. Now, also yesterday, the International Court for Justice ordered Israel to ensure unhindered provision of needed services, including food, water, fuel, electricity, and medical supplies. And it said Israel must do this to comply with its obligations under the 1947 Genocide Convention, which both Israel and the United States have signed and are obligated as a result of that to enforce. Now, what we're seeing, though, is the opposite. We're not seeing a commitment to international law. What is a rules-based order if it doesn't start from the standpoint of accepted international law? And that's what the UN Security Council represents. The International Court of Justice represents that. So what gives Netanyahu the right to say that doesn't have a binding effect, and the US to defend him for that? American international human rights lawyer Craig Mokhiber, who headed the UN Human Rights Office in New York City for many, many years until he resigned last November, cut through the sophistry. What Mokhiber said is, quote, "The U.S. has shown itself willing to tear down the entire international legal framework to defend one genocidal apartheid state, distorting humanitarian law, abrogating the Genocide Convention, and declaring the Security Council resolution non-binding," unquote. Now, what we've been saying is that the rules-based order has nothing to do with international law, but with rules that are asserted by the nation with the strongest military in the world, until they're arguably the strongest military in the world. The idea of might makes right. We can do whatever we want, and you have to obey. And that's why there's a rebellion from the global majority. Now, let me give you an example of other instances where there's a rebellion against this arrogant Eurocentrism from the United States and Europe. Yesterday, the government of Ireland announced that it will join the South African International Court for Justice genocide case against Israel. Very significant because the Irish know something about apartheid and colonial oppression. Then there was a letter released by 140 faith leaders from around the world, a pre-Easter call to action for a permanent ceasefire and an end to all arms sales and shipments to Israel. They concluded their letter by saying, "We cannot be silent. Enough atrocities in Gaza, enough violence, death, and destruction. May love triumph over hate." This is from religious leaders from around the world. Then there's a very interesting article in the Jerusalem Post that reports that Israel Defense Force senior leadership believe that there's no military solution to Gaza and that a diplomatic solution is necessary. The unidentified IDF sources warned of logistical problems in carrying out an attack on Rafah. They also said there's no military solution. An assault on Rafah is unlikely to save more hostages or kill more Hamas leaders. So what is the purpose of the assault on Rafah? Well, clearly, the Netanyahu regime has completely adopted the outlook of the most extreme of the settler colonialists in Israel, such as Itamar Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, the finance minister, which is that Gaza has to be cleared completely of Palestinians and opened up as part of Greater Israel. Now, as we see, the rebellion against this policy is spreading. And this is the fight right now, which is threatening, as Senator Schumer correctly said, to isolate Israel, but also to isolate the United States. Who can trust the United States if the U.S. is going to engage in illegal actions in defense of wars that have no ultimate purpose except to reassert the unipolar order under the military hegemony of the United States? And that's where we are in the world today. Now, there are two necessary steps, the first of which is increasingly being discussed, and that is no more U.S., UK, European military, financial, or political support to Israel until the attack is stopped and there are serious negotiations for a durable peace, which includes an independent Palestinian state. Now, that's being discussed virtually everywhere right now. Now, the second point is more specific, and that is that a diplomatic, political, economic solution has been presented by the Schiller Institute, by the LaRouche organization, the Oasis Plan of Lyndon LaRouche. We'll have a conference on April 13th to discuss it, but it defines the basis for mutually beneficial economic cooperation between Israel and the surrounding Arab states, including Palestine, based on desalination of water, development of energy, including especially high-temperature gas-cooled reactors, nuclear reactors, and a commitment to an industrial basis for the Palestinian state. Now, on the first point, no more aid, the question is, will Biden take a stand? Or more realistically, can he be forced to take a stand as the global majority is rejecting what he's doing? But equally importantly, a growing number of Americans are telling pollsters they will not support Biden because of his complicity in genocide. The American people don't want to be complicit in genocide of the Palestinian people. And that's the point we have to make, both of these points. No to genocide, and yes to mutually beneficial economic reconstruction. And I'd urge people to take the link in today's description section to register for the conference on April 13th. It's an online conference. It will provide an in-depth discussion of how peace can overcome hate. So thanks for joining me this week. Share our videos, get our material around, and join our mobilization.